Landon from Today's Tech, and let's talk about the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold3, the third generation of Samsung's first foldable experiment, and I'm actually liking what I'm seeing here. This is a phone that I feel a little bit more comfortable actually recommending to you guys, and the main reason being is the improved durability. See, if you watched my Fold 2 review, the underlying question that I had was, would the average consumer want to deal with this form factor on a daily basis? Now, the Fold 2 was a fantastic device, don't get me wrong at all, but it was thick, it was heavy, it was not water resistant, and the display was just a little bit less durable. And that's a huge difference from the candy bar style smartphones that we've gotten used to with some of the strongest glass around, water and dust resistance, the whole bit. So here we are 1 year later with the Fold 3 priced $200 cheaper at $1,800. And now the question is this a fold in the right direction? Well, here's what we get. So the Fold 3 has definitely been in the gym working out and lost 11 grams. And you can tell it feels a bit lighter in the hand, but don't get it twisted. It's still heavy, much heavier than the iPhone 12 Pro Max or the S21 Ultra, but it's still an extremely premium build. The frame is actually made from an all new, stronger aluminum that Samsung is referring to as Armor aluminum. They thinned out the whole thing, so it's thinner when it's unfolded and when it's folded. So it's a little bit easier to wield with one hand when you're on the cover screen. The hinge is smaller too, like it doesn't protrude as much, so it makes it look even sleeker. And then they flatten the edges, which also gives it a more premium vibe. It's literally symmetrical enough to stand up on all four sides when folded. And then lastly, they kept the matte finish on the rear glass, which looks even better in matte black. And they tidied up the camera module, made it single file. And in my opinion, what we get is a device that looks even more premium and more mature than the last generation. And they actually added water resistance this year. So the Fold 3 is IPX8 water resistant, not quite dust resistant. Like you could still get some dust or some sand in the hinge, but at least now you can get this guy wet safely without a concern, which I've yet to do. Like I've taken it in the shower to catch up on some ESPN using my beloved float suction mount, but I've yet to splash it or really get it wet. But this is a sign that Samsung wants to try and make foldables as mainstream as possible by increasing their durability. And I would say this is a solid step forward. Even the inner display is apparently 30% more durable, and that helps allow the all-new S Pen support. Now, I didn't particularly notice any improvement. Nothing stood out to me. It still has some give when you press on it a little hard, but overall, it still feels like a solid display. It doesn't feel mushy at all. And the inner display is still huge at 7.6 inches. It's still got a visible crease down the middle, which you honestly totally get used to after like a week. And it's still the very bright, sharp 120 hertz display that almost anyone would love to have in their pocket. Like I literally polled my family and asked them which foldable phone they'd rather have, the Fold 3 or the Flip 3. And 9 of them said the Fold 3 after seeing them both for the first time and getting a good look at this display. And that just shows you the level of desire for this type of form factor just based on the versatility of the two displays on this phone. The only downside of using the inner display is the fact that it automatically becomes a two-handed device and you don't always have two hands available. Now, the cover display is still as slim as Kevin Durant, and it's just as efficient to use. So I find myself using the 6.2-inch cover display probably just as much as the inner display, especially this year with the Fold 3 being slimmer from side to side, so it works even better than the Fold 2 as a one-handed device. And it's 120 hertz now, so we get that super smooth refresh rate on both displays. But if I'm being honest, this unique and tall display is a little bit uncomfortable to use for certain tasks. The biggest is typing, and that's because the keyboard is a fraction of its normal width on a typical smartphone. So I've personally gotten around that just by swipe typing most of the time, but it's still not the most ideal. You'll honestly find yourself asking, damn, should I just use the cover display? I kind of don't feel like unfolding this right now. And believe it or not, it's a dilemma that comes up a lot more than you'd think. Now, this year, in case you didn't notice, there will be no new Galaxy Note device. Now, Samsung says it's because of the chip shortage, but my theory is that they're testing the waters to see if foldables, namely the S Pen wielding Z Fold3, can pick up the slack from the lack of Galaxy Note sales in the second half of the year. So, as a result, we get S Pen support on the Z Fold3, and this is pretty big. I think the idea of having a 7.6-inch canvas to take notes on throughout the day is phenomenal. However, the practicality of it is another story, and we'll get to that. But this new S Pen is called the S Pen Fold Edition, and that's because it has an all-new retractable rubber tip that's apparently much gentler on the display. But surprisingly, it takes a lot of force to make it retract, so you still shouldn't press down as hard as you normally would. But almost everything else is the same as the S Pen we saw sold alongside the S21 Ultra, so no Bluetooth features. That's now entirely exclusive to the $99 S Pen Pro, but it's got the improved latency and all the good stuff that makes the S Pen the S Pen. And I'm sure you're wondering how well it works with the crease in the display, and I really didn't notice it when I was taking notes. I could imagine if you were an artist, it could bother you, but just as a mere note taker, I had no issues using the S Pen on the Fold 3. But get this, I'm actually not a huge fan of the S Pen as a separate accessory. Hear me out. So with the Galaxy Note, as you know, the S Pen lives inside a silo in the phone. So whenever you need it, you can pull it out, jot something down, and put it away. Out of sight, out of mind. But in the case of the S21 Ultra and the Z Fold 3, where the S Pen does not live inside the phone and is stored in a particular case that you have to use, I find it to be a bit more of an inconvenience when I would much rather have a case of my choosing as opposed to a case that's thicker and heavier than a case needs to be. It's the idea of having to buy an additional accessory to take advantage of another accessory that just makes me prefer the Note style of S Pen wielding. But with that being said, I still think it's an incredible addition to the Z Fold form factor. The canvas you have to write on is nearly twice as large as a normal smartphone, and it just adds to the productivity this phone already provides. But I can't help but think how convenient it would be if it actually worked on the cover display as well, instead of always having to open it up to the full screen just to jot down a quick thought. But I get it, one step at a time. Oh, and as a matter of fact, speaking of steps, Samsung took a step forward by delivering the first under-display camera on a foldable, but they also took a step down in quality. My guess is that they had the data that showed that the inner display camera usage was quite low. And so I think the focus here was to make the display appear unobstructed and of course to be able to flex the first UDC on a foldable. Now, some of the photos are usable in bright lighting after it runs the denoising and sharpening algorithms, but others are just bad. Not only is it tough to formulate a high resolution image with just 4 megapixels, but you have to remember it's also shooting through the display. So yeah, it's certainly not flagship quality, and I honestly would have been okay with just keeping the hole punch. Neither of them are an eyesore though by any means, and you really can't even notice the UDC if you don't look for it. But at least we get the 10 megapixel selfie camera on the cover display in hole punch fashion, which produces much better flagship level photos. And it's just way easier to take a picture with one hand using the cover display versus 2 hands on the inner display. But if you are willing to take a selfie with 2 hands, you can tap this icon in the corner that turns the cover display into a viewfinder. So you can take a selfie using the best cameras on the phone. And the Fold 3 has roughly the same camera specs as the Fold 2. So 3 12 megapixel shooters on the back, the ultra wide, the main camera, and the 2x telephoto camera. And you're probably thinking, oh hell yeah, for $1,800, I'm gonna get the best camera Samsung has to offer. Well, no, not quite. That title belongs to the S21 Ultra, so there's no 108 megapixel lens, no 10x periscope zoom, and perhaps that's to keep certain features exclusive to certain phones, or just to keep the price down, but I'm pretty confident in these cameras. They produce photos on par with what I'm used to from Samsung, and that's definitely a good sign. And they added a new feature that activates when you press this icon in the corner or when you slightly fold the inner screen and enter flex mode. So now, as soon as you take photos with the rear camera on the inner display, you can preview all the photos you've taken on the left side of the screen and scroll through them. And they sprinkled a lot of changes like that throughout the UI that help take advantage of the full inner display. There's a display setting called MultiView that's on by default this year, and it's basically just a tablet mode. So you see how you can see the main settings menu on the left while seeing the sub menu on the right? Well, that's tablet mode. So instead of just showing you one thing at a time that's way bigger, it shows several things at once, and that carries on throughout the UI. In messages, you can see your complete list of messages while responding to a message. You get the tablet version of YouTube, Gmail, Apple Music, even the Google Discover feed, and it really suits a phone of this size to operate more like a tablet than a phone. There's also basically an optional app dock like you get in macOS or Windows 11. It takes the app's Edge panel that we've had since the S6 Edge Plus and permanently sticks it on the right side of the inner display, and I love this feature. A couple years back, I moved all of my app folders to the Edge panel to kind of force myself to take advantage of the Edge panel, and it actually stuck. So all of my folders are back to being just one tap away, and I still get a minimally obstructed view of my wallpaper. So a definite win-win. And it really makes navigating the UI much faster. But shifting gears back to the display, since most apps do not natively acquiesce to the 2:3 aspect ratio, Samsung brought over features they were testing in the Good Lock app, which is kind of like their playground for experimental features, and they're now baked right into the settings menu under Labs in the advanced features menu. So you can force any app to take up the full display corner to corner, and it actually works. Instagram is actually the best app that I've come across that benefits the most from being expanded to fill the screen. And there are a few more lab features like forcing apps to auto rotate or forcing apps to take advantage of flex mode. And again, that's where the setting is for the app dock as well. Obviously, some of these features were already available, but not everyone is familiar with Good Lock. And so I'm glad to see that they brought these features right into the settings menu. And this may be an unpopular opinion, but I'm actually digging the split keyboard UI on the inner display as opposed to one giant keyboard. I usually refrain from ever typing in landscape on my phones, but it feels more natural to me and it's more comfortable on this display. And as you can see, I'm rocking a custom keyboard with the channel colors, customized using the Good Lock app called Keys Cafe. Now the all-important battery life on the Z Fold 3 is not very good. For starters, the battery is smaller than last year's Fold, on top of the fact that the cover display is now 120 Hertz. That's not a good recipe for good battery life, and it shows. After getting up at like 8 a.m. and going to the gym, this guy is down to 30% by 3 p.m., sometimes sooner. You can see as soon as this guy comes off the charger, it's just downhill. Now, it is relatively quick to charge with the 25-watt charging that it supports, but I'd prefer to have a better balance of how long the battery lasts versus how fast it charges. I'd much rather have a battery that can easily last all day and perhaps charges a little bit on the slower side, but I digress. So yeah, battery life, Z Fold 3, not so hot, unfortunately. But when you take a step back and you look at the whole picture, obviously Samsung's intentions are to try and bring foldables to the mainstream. First, by not releasing a new Galaxy Note this year, and second, by bringing the prices down. So $1,800 for the Fold 3, that's $200 cheaper than last year, and then $1,000 for the Flip 3, and that's $450 cheaper than last year. And as their first legit attempt at pushing foldables into the mainstream, I think they've made a compelling offering for those looking to sort of merge their smartphone and tablet experience into one pocketable device. And to do that, they improved the software, made it more tablet-like, they added S Pen support, they increased the display durability, and overall device durability by using stronger aluminum and adding water resistance. And I think that's enough to get a larger number of consumers willing to use a foldable on a daily basis. Now, onto the subject of whether the Fold series is actually a viable replacement for the Note series. And I think that's a negative on that one, Chief. Now, don't get me wrong, using the S Pen on the Fold is so dope, but the fact that you don't really have anywhere to put it unless you buy another accessory just doesn't sit well with me, and I would still much rather have the Galaxy Note around, but that's just me. And so, the answer to the question that I posed at the beginning of this video is yes. The Fold 3 is definitely a fold in the right direction. And with that, let me know what you guys think about the Fold 3 down in the comment section. And as always, thank you so much for supporting the channel by sticking around until the end. Always appreciated. Make sure to get subscribed and stay tuned for my reviews of everything, literally everything that Samsung just announced. Alrighty guys, peace and love.